Evening, everyone. I hope it's the time we should start right now. I hope some others will be joining in the due course. I would like to welcome you all to the third book club organized by the Ceylon College of Physicians. We have a very special speaker for the evening today, and without further ado, I would like to invite the president, Ceylon College of Physicians, Professor Arosha Disanayake, to introduce our special speaker, Mr. Malinga Gunaratne. Over to you, sir.
A warm welcome to members of the book club who will be watching this program online like this, and who will be then watching on YouTube as well, because we know that many have a lot of commitments during the evening, and then they will watch on YouTube later on. We will start anyway because it's our scheduled time. I usually get a CV down whenever I'm introducing somebody, but then Malinga is different because Malinga has been my friend for more than a decade. We have known each other quite well over the past decade or so. Malinga is a man of many facets. I think he's very well known in the community in Sri Lanka for the tea that he produces in the Handunugoda estate. Now, Handunugoda estate, I have heard, is the tea estate which is situated closest to the sea. It is just 1 or 2 kilometers away from the sea. You can almost see the sea from the estate. And it's difficult to imagine that somebody would actually create a tea estate so close to the sea. But that's Malinga. In addition to that, Malinga produces a wide range of premium teas. The most famous of it is the Virgin White Tea. I'm sure he'll speak to us about Virgin White Tea as well, which probably is the most expensive tea in the world. You know, it's that exclusive. So Malinga is a doyen in the tea industry of Sri Lanka. And then he started his career in the plantation sector when it was under the British, and then served in the nationalized tea plantations, and now runs his own tea concern. So Malinga is really, belongs to the top echelons when it comes to tea in Sri Lanka. I can't think of anyone more suited than Malinga really to speak about tea in Sri Lanka. Then the second facet of Malinga is he is an author. He has written 5 popular books. I've gifted many of his books to my overseas friends who have enjoyed those books. Malinga has written The Plantation Raj and The Suicide Club, which are to do, a lot of it is to do with tea. He has also written a book called For a Sovereign State. And then 2 other books, The God's Secret Agent, and I think I missed one.
Tortured Island, Arusha.
Tortured Island. That's the one which deals with the insurgency, JVP insurgency in the 1980s, and Herman's experiences with that. That again is a very important landmark in the Sri Lankan political history. So that's the second aspect of it, and that is obviously the reason why we've invited Herman to speak to the book club members today, because he is an author. So this talk is quite fascinating because he will in some ways be speaking about the books that he has written, and he could probably tell people who wish to be authors who wish to write books in the future, some aspects of how to write a book, etc. So from an author's perspective. Second thing is the other aspect of this talk will be the journey of tea in Sri Lanka, of which he's an expert as well. So this is actually a talk which covers 2 purposes in one go. So that's the second aspect of Malinga. The first one was his tea expertise. Second is he's an author. And then, of course, thirdly, I think this is an extremely important aspect of Malinga. He is a political the role that he has played in the political, social, maybe military even scenario of Sri Lanka. Malinga has contributed in his own way towards retaining the unitary state of this country. And yes, now my first, I first got to know about Malinga. I met him much later when I quite accidentally found a book in my father's library called For a Sovereign State. And because of my personal passion into politics and social aspects of it, I read that book, and it was one of the most fascinating books I've read. And those who are interested in the political history of Sri Lanka, I would strongly suggest that you read that book, and I'm sure Malinga will mention that as well. So that covers the Maduruoya settlement period, and then that is where I first got to know him. But I met him personally much later when I moved to work in Galle, and then of course we had a very fortuitous meeting in our ward. So Malinga has played a significant role in shaping the political history of Sri Lanka in his own way. So that is the third aspect of the man. And just to leave one aspect of it, because once Malinga comes to see me occasionally when he needs some health advice, comes to see me in hospital, and Malinga is, he is dashingly handsome in his sarong and shirt always. So he walked in and saw me, and then when he walked out, the next patient asked me, "No, doctor, who was that?" I just gave a very short answer. I said, that's a national hero. And I left it at that. He didn't know what I was talking about, but that's because after reading For a Sovereign State and getting to know Malinga's role in the Sri Lankan political history, I think that is an apt description of that man. And if you read the book, I think you might agree with my description of Malinga as a national hero. So it has been a great pleasure and a privilege to have known Malinga over so many years on a personal basis. And then, of course, he provides me with the two most wonderful teas, which I taste every day, Sapphire Oolong and the Hadunugoda green tea. I'm sure he'll speak about teas as well. So without taking any further time, I wish to invite Malinga to start his talk. And Anushka, if you have anything to say before that, you may mention that. Otherwise, let's have Malinga speak to us. Thank you.
Can I speak?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
Thank you for inviting me to a very distinguished participation in Physicians Book Club. I'm indeed honored to be a participant. Now, I don't say this in the form of any kind of self-aggrandizement, but I have written 5 books spanning a period of 30 years. The principal one is the Plantation Raj. Now, that deals with the nationalization of plantations. As an observer from the ringside, I endeavor to tell the public the story of now considered the ill-advised nationalization of, in my view, Sri Lanka's most precious asset, which is the tea industry. Now, before I proceed further, allow me to mention to you the contribution that tea makes to the nation. The principal one is that it is the most enduring legacy that has been left behind by the British Empire. I say so because it is the #1 foreign exchange earner in real terms. Secondly, we have a population, as everyone knows, of 22 million people, out of which 3.5 million are employed in the tea industry. So those are the main twin aspects of the tea industry that impact on the economy of Sri Lanka. Thirdly, the third and perhaps the most important, is the brand of Ceylon tea. Now I'm not an Anglophile, but I have got to pay tribute to where tribute is due. The name Ceylon tea is known in the furthest flung outpost of the world, It is far more popular than Mercedes-Benz or Rolls-Royce. It is known everywhere. Now, that was a creation of a person by the name of Sir Thomas Lipton, who was a Scotsman. And, the fact of the matter is, despite the subsequent decline of the tea industry, for which there are a number of reasons, and the learned doctors can ask me about them. Despite that, Sri Lanka teas get the highest price for tea in the world. Of that, there is no dispute. And if we can expand the tea industry, I also happen to be a member of the task force appointed by His Excellency the President. Don't hold that against me, though. To supervise the transformation of the Sri Lanka's tea industry from normal inorganic fertilizer to organic fertilizer. Now, that is the background. The second book I wrote is The Tortured Island. Now, Tortured Island deals with the JVP insurrection in a manner of speaking, and also about the hitherto unknown caste factor in Sri Lanka, and what that in my view it is a principal cause that led to a rebellion of the youth in the south. That's the Tortured Island. The third book I wrote was for a sovereign state. Now, I had to, when I relinquished my duties as chairman of the JDB in Norelia, I was offered a position of general manager of a corporation in the Mahavali Development Scheme. Now, there I saw a ringside view of what was going on in the country in regard to the quest of a separate state, and I thought it was my duty to bring the focus on the nuances of what it was. It was a battle really not for anything else but for land and water. And the Mahavali held the key to that. So that to that extent, readers will find it fascinating. None of my books are great works of English literature. However, they speak to facts and contemporary facts. So for a sovereign state. Then the next book I wrote was entitled The Suicide Club. Now I will tell you very briefly, if you will permit me to tell you the story. The Suicide Club deals with my life with the plantations and my movement from the most lowest level on a plantation to eventually participating in guiding the destinies of the tea plantations in this country. Now, the Suicide, and it might interest you to know that the title of the Suicide Club is simply this. My grandfather owned 2,200 acres of land in Angama. 1,000 acres was taken over when the British plantations were nationalized. And 1,000 acres was lost due to the activities of the Suicide Club. Now you might wonder what this intriguing title is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, the Suicide Club is an informal association of gamblers. And because of the inevitability of gamblers committing suicide, they themselves called it the Suicide Club. And on one fine day in Matara, in our ancestral home, which was the headquarters of the Suicide Club, on a game of cards, my grandfather lost 90,000 rupees that perhaps would have been about 100 years ago. Now, it was the rule of the Suicide Club that all gambling debts be settled within 48 hours. Now, he did not have the money to do that. And his brother-in-law was the Queen's Counsel, Mr. Dioja Vikrama. He said, okay, there's no issue. If you can take a week, as long as you settle it, it's okay. He said, no, the rule of the club is that the debts have to be settled in 48 hours. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I have no money to do it. And therefore, I am surrendering an equivalent amount of land. And he surrendered to the winner of the card game, 900 acres. So that is the Suicide Club. And that deals, it's a very interesting story. You know, I came from Matara, and I was almost catapulted into this great big plantation Raj. Of course, the first apprehension that I had was, I was working among Caucasians, mainly Englishmen, that I would be discriminated upon. Now, that did not happen. On the contrary, I was given selective favorable status within the plantation system. And that was mainly because I worked my heart out. I performed my duties to the best of my ability. And therefore, I was accepted, more than accepted, into this system. And also it relates some interesting stories, some funny, some not so funny, about what went on in the plantations during that very significant period. And I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it was the winner of, it was shortlisted for the Gratian Prize, #1. And quite apart from that, I mean, that to me has no significance. It is in the 8th print now. And at one time, they said that it was the fastest selling English book. That's in regard to the Suicide Club. Thirdly, ladies and gentlemen, I wrote a book called God's Secret Agent. Now, I was born a Buddhist from Mathura. Nobody in my family was ever proselytized or entered into any other religion other than Buddhism. However, I had a ringside experience of a man who claimed to have the power of the Holy Spirit. And it was only then that I realized that there was an enormous amount of sorcery, you know, what they call in Sri Lankan parlance, punya, that goes on in this land. I mean, it is evident to you even today. And I had the opportunity of meeting this man quite by accident. And he took me to a world of darkness and how to read the country of those evil forces. Now, I didn't realize that this kind of mumbo jumbo or sorcery was practiced by the elite of this, the so-called elite of this land. I thought it was only the preserve of the folk in the village. But I can tell you with great responsibility that these evil powers, evil forces were being mobilized by the highest in the land against their enemies or against whom they had envy. So out of all the books that I wrote, I always try to convey a message, a contemporaneous message. And the book that I wanted people to read the most was the God's Secret Agent. However, due to these turbulent times, the reaction was not as I expected. However, one day Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit came to visit me, and along with the leading members of the of the Cardinals Conference. I mean, those are the people who are responsible for electing the Pope. And I had a long chat with him. I took him around my plantation. I had nothing to give him. And I gave him a copy of all my books and also the God's Secret Agent. And I, of course, for the life of me, never expected him to read any one of them. However, in a couple of days later, I got a call from the Cardinal's palace and said the Cardinal was trying to get at you yesterday. And of course, my telephone was on silent and he couldn't get through. He wanted you to participate in a sermon that he was giving to the congregation in Negombo about your book. Now for me, that was the biggest tribute because here was the Cardinal Malcolm Ranjit, who later became a good friend. And I'm also the agricultural advisor to the Catholic Church. Now here was the Cardinal paying tribute to a book written by a Buddhist about the Holy Spirit. So now I don't want to mention it on this, but you will probably know that the highest in this land are engaging in this sorcery, if you like to call it that. And they seem to feel that they are getting away with it. They are not getting away with it. Neither is the country getting away with it. And we are being plunged deeper and deeper into a abyss and into a serious political and economic crisis. I'm not saying that is entirely due to the intervention of sorcery, but I am inclined to believe that a large that sorcery is responsible for most of these things. And if you see even our leading politicians, I mean, I have nothing against people hanging amulets on their necks or around their bellies, but you can see all of them are doing that. Now that I can tell you has nothing to do with the Buddha. It has nothing to do with Jesus Christ. It is people paying obeisance to powers of evil. So in that respect, I want to bring out into the public the effects of sorcery and what it was having, what it was doing to our land. Now, I would like to commend every one of you gentlemen and ladies to read that book because it is contemporaneous and it is, I mean, you know, when you write about that, people consider you to be like the guy who is bringing mud into the sitting room. Nobody likes to do that. But I thought I'll do that because I endeavor to convey a message to the public of this country. And yeah, those are the books that I have written. They were of topical interest. And I must say, despite my very meager educational qualifications, I have not even passed the SSC at that time. They have met with considerable success, not because they are great works of English literature, but because I think I possess the ability to tell a story. They are stories. So I would like to commend to you all my books, which are in some way or the other quite fascinating, but mainly the God Secret Agent, which attempts to deliver a message that is contemporaneous to what is happening in our country. That, you know, so that I have now dealt with the books that I have written. Now, Dr. Arosha was a little extravagant in his description of my credentials. I have, in different ways, I have participated, just as he has described, in all those events. However, I think that this country has the potential to emerge from this crisis better than before, you know, and I think Dr. Arosha is a great student of politics. I was a ringside participant, I don't engage in it anymore. So that is generally, ladies and gentlemen, the sum total in summarized form of the books that I have written. Now, if any of you gentlemen or ladies want to ask me a question, any question, I will be quite happy to answer you. And if you want me to deal with any other subject, Arosha, or if you want me to enlarge on, there is one fascinating story I must tell you, which will impress an intellectual audience like yours. But I don't know whether if time permits, and if you would allow me to do that, I would be happy to do so. So can I crave your indulgence to ask you to ask any questions that you like? Am I clear? Do
Yes,
you
we can
hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Very good, sir.
Hello. Yes. There is a Arosha.
Malinga, please go ahead with your the story, and then of course, once we'd like to hear a little, about tea as well. Like how your journey through tea and how you covered those in the two books, and then of course, once we've listened to the stories, then we'll probably have a chat. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
And no problem.
Tell us. We'll be happy to hear the stories.
Yeah. Now this is a story that it's not a story. It's a true occurrence of facts which I'm going to tell you. Just before the nationalization of the plantations, we were all working for various British-owned agency houses. The agency house overlords considered it important to get Dr. Colvina de Silva to make a speech to all the planters assembled on that particular day. And it's very green in my memory what he said. And I will try to tell you that because you will, in that story, I am sure you will understand the success of the plantations. He said, ladies and gentlemen, when I became the Minister of Plantation Industries, I had a look at the plantations. And I saw people with very meager educational qualifications, both white men and brown guys like us, running the plantations. And what did they have? They had above average benefits in that they were living in the most luxurious houses. They had so many vehicles and staff, 4 or 5 members of the staff were serving every one of them. And they were paid a very high salary. So I asked the plantation people, now on what basis do you recruit these people, both the white men and us? They said, well, we just look at their personalities, whether eventually they are dealing with controlling labor, whether they have the ability to control labor, and perhaps a major consideration was their prowess in the field of sports. So he said, I was quite surprised at this criteria for recruitment, because I asked them, look, why don't you consider taking graduates? I mean, the graduates of the country are in a far less endowed position than you people are, and they are far more educated. So, I mean, I was met with silence because they did not know the reason. Then, ladies and gentlemen, he said, I asked my secretary, who was Dr. Dorrit de Souza, to break the mold and recruit agricultural graduates, which he proceeded to do. The first batch of graduates of 6 people decamped from they were paid the same benefits and the same salaries and the same perquisites that we were. They just ran away from the plantations in a couple of months. And Dr. Doric de Souza came and told me, Honorable Minister, that has failed. So I said, Doric, come on, Doric. Just telling me that it failed is not going to work. Can you find out why it failed? And he says, ladies and gentlemen, this is why it failed. A man who is an agricultural graduate now, today, first applies to the Faculty of Medicine. He does not get accepted. Then he applies to what is called the Licentiate of Dentistry. Yeah, Licentiate of Dentistry. Arosha, am I right in that?
It's now slightly different. It's a bachelor's degree in dental sciences, but I'm sure it would have been that the time that Dr. Colvin de Silva headed it. Yes.
Yes. And he says they failed there too. Then they, as a merciful alternative, they applied to the Faculty of Agriculture. So he said, ladies and gentlemen, we have a man on a plantation who first wanted to be a doctor. Now, so is it going to work? Right? So that was the lesson that Dr. Colvin de Silva told us. Then we who were seated around the table with barely minimum educational qualifications, enjoying above average benefits when you compare it with the other people of peer status in Sri Lanka, we were enjoying above average salaries, overseas leave, paid for leave. We began to realize that we have to perpetuate this system. It is only in this system that we were able to enjoy this above average benefits. So what happened? Only the pigment of the skin changed. From the white sahib, he very cleverly rather, supplanted a brown sahib who had the same values, who spoke the same way, who went to the club, who played cricket, rugby. All those plantation people, by the way, were excellent rugby players. So if you get the point I'm trying to make, that was, in my opinion, what made it work. Because we had on the plantations a set of people who would go to any extent to keep their jobs, to run their plantations, simply because they were getting above average benefits in the country, you know. So that I think in the depth of that conversation should enlighten people like you about how that system worked. Then Colvin de Silva, I must say, was the best plantation minister that we ever had. He had the intellectual understanding of the plantations. He was not arrogant. And because he understood the plantations, he said at the end, ladies and gentlemen, we nationalized the plantations. But I told the Honorable Prime Minister that the plantations are very well run by the British companies. We don't have a better system. So until we have a better system, we own the plantations. There is no problem. Let them run them. So that is how it continued for some time. Then came the time of the late lamented, now I have nothing against Mr. Hector Kobbekadua. I rather understand his motivation for what he did. But there came his time as Minister of Agriculture. He forced the Prime Minister to nationalize the management, and he took over the management. Then what happened? Then ladies and gentlemen, it became jobs for the boys. Then, all political favorites, all guys who have campaigned for them here, there, and everywhere, were catapulted into very important situations on the plantations. And then Colvina de Silva says, forgive me for saying it, but you're talking about a system that was structured by the British. I'm not saying it's the best system, but definitely it was a system that worked. And finally, Dr. Colvina de Silva made the observation. He said, I have studied the psychology of the plantation worker. They may not know much English, but they will soon identify the manager who does not know English. And from that point onwards, he will not be given the same respect that the white men got in the past. So that is an unfortunate consequence of behavior over which we have no control. That is the perception. That is the perception of the planter in the minds of the plantation worker with whom we had to get these results. So I just want to tell you the story how Dr. Colvina de Silva, who was not a planter, who had only a fleeting association with the plantations, how he was able in a short space of time, not only to understand the success of the plantation system, but also to tell us who were seated around the table why we were doing the things that we were doing. So that I think I always say this to various audiences, that now we have dismantled that system. Mr. Hector Kopekadua dismantled the system, and he also dismantled the management of the plantations. One day he happened to come to my plantation, unannounced, but with a whole retinue of people. But he was very, very amiable, very good. And I asked him, I said, sir, why did you altogether, all of a sudden think of nationalization of the management? He said, I come from the Candian regions of this country. I saw the oppression of my people, first by the white man. First, our lands were appropriated. Our lands belonging to the Candian peasantry were appropriated by the British plantation Raj. Then I saw the oppression of our people by the white man. Then on top of that, came the Sinhala Mudalali from the low country, which was really true. Now they were given all the housing and the trading opportunities on the plant. They were supplying the building materials, they were supplying the beef, etc., all that. He said no. So I thought it was my historical mission to correct this injustice. Now, and he proceeded to do that. How did he correct it? He did not correct it by handing over some uncultivated extents of land to the people of the Candian region. All they did was, they bought a Buddhist priest, in some instances, they bought a barber, and they made him a estate manager. So, can I ask you, learned gentlemen, whether it will work? So, those were the ills of nationalization. Nationalization by itself was not a bad thing, as long as they did not interfere with the management. So that is another story I want to tell you about the plantation system. Then where, the funny side of it, I will tell you. When we were first inducted into this big, magnificent plantation Raj, it was like a oasis. An oasis of prosperity in the middle of poverty. it was really a two contradictory situations. On the periphery of the plantations, we found singular peasants living on ravines, on rocks, barely able to eke out an existence. But on the plantations, we saw magnificent bungalows. They were British owned. The plantations I worked for were British owned. And of course, we thought we were living in a different world. And to tell you a funny story, the chairman of the company I used to work for was a guy by the name of Sir John Arbuthnot. He was the MP for Dover. He was not a bad man, but he was a little overbearing, and he was very conscious of his position. And it was customary that he used to come to the plantation every year during December. And my boss, who was a white man himself, Nicholson, used to come and tell me, "Oh, Herman, this guy comes in to the plantation during the Christmas season. My family is here. He's inviting various people, engineers, other planters. I am a nervous wreck at the end of it all. He drinks into the silent night. He has lunch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, drinks till 12 o'clock and so on." So it was customary for Sir John Arbuthnot, when he visited Dunsinane, that's the plantation I was on, to invite all our assistants for dinner. And there were 5 of us. I was the only brown fellow. There was Ian Austin, Terence Donnan, Ted Dalgetty, so many fellows like that. And it was sort of everybody was seated on the edge of his chairs, paying obeisance to this great big English lord. And he used to ask the most preposterous questions from us. One fine day, he asked everybody, do you think you consider it important if I give you the Daily Telegraph? He started asking this question from every one of those people who are seated around the sitting room. And everybody mumbled some excuse. I don't think they had the faintest idea or knowledge of what went on because they were far removed from the United Kingdom. Of course, they mumbled various excuses. Then it came to my turn. He asked me, he said, "Herman, would you like to read the Daily Telegraph?" I said, "Sir, apart from reading the Daily Telegraph, I do not have time to even read the daily news." Now that was, like a red rag to a bull. So Nicholson called me to a side and he said, Nicholson was my boss. He called me to a side. He said, "Can't you be a little more polite to Sir John?" I said, "Well, he asked me a question and I gave him an honest answer." And by that time, I thought I had shot myself in the foot because everybody was looking at me as if I was what the cat brought home. And when this ended, he sends a report when he goes back to the United Kingdom. He said, "I met all your assistants." He's writing to George Stuart, and they sent the report to Nicholson. He said, I met all your assistants, but the guy that impressed me most was so-and-so, and therefore I want you to send him for a special training in regard to tea manufacture and various other things. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Those men, not all of them, they recognized, I think. Then he asked me the next question. When I came to Sri Lanka, I met 2 or 3 politicians, one of which was Dadison Naik, who was the Prime Minister at that time. He asked me for a contribution to the United National Party. Do you think I should make it? That question is asking me. So I said, Sir John, I would be disinclined to agree that a foreign force or foreign power in some way engages. I mean, I was naive. It was happening all the time. I didn't know. I don't think it is right for you to interfere with the politics of this country and to support any particular political party. I told him that. Then, gentlemen, what he said to me? He said, I am a conservative. And if somebody was going to give the Labour Party money, I wouldn't have liked it myself. So, they ask you those questions in those august places, perhaps expecting a servile reply. But when they don't get the reply that they are seeking, they seem to have some kind of respect for you. So that is another story I want to tell you. Right. Then, of course, I have had very unfortunate experiences with the law. Following the Madruwe settlements, I was taken and placed into, police custody, and I was placed in solitary confinement for a period of time. And then subsequently, on the intervention of Mr. Tondaman, who was my friend, J.R.J. Wardner released me to a situation of house arrest, where there were 3 or 4 policemen who were designated to guard me. I was not going to run away. So that I have had a rather stimulating, rather unexpected, and rather checkered experiences in my career. I'm the richer for it. But I keep away from all that now. And I just concentrate on running my plantation. Now, I'll tell you the story of this virgin white tea that Arusha is talking about. I don't know whether I'm taking too much of your time. Huh?
I'm sure we are fine.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Now, the virgin white tea, I'm 78 years old. I have been working on the British plantations and the nationalized plantations for maybe 65 years. Now, I had never heard of what is called white tea. Then a British colleague of mine, he said, look, Herman, there is a thing called Imperial White Tea that is being produced in China. It is said to be the only tea that is untouched by hand. But the Chinese don't do it anymore. So why don't you consider recreating the ritual here? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I was extremely interested. But when my friend told me the story of how the Chinese harvested this tea, they are said to have employed virgins to cut the white tea with golden scissors. It is said to have fallen into a golden bowl. And it was given as a tribute to the emperor. This is during the Song and the Tang dynasty, 5,000 years ago. Now, this is the story. It is there in all. You can go to the internet, you will see the white tea story. Now, this is what my friend wanted me to recreate on my plantation. Now, I was extremely interested. But if I suddenly at this stage of my life, this was about 15 years ago, if I started looking for immaculate girls with golden scissors, my colleagues who are dotted all over the world would have thought I had bats in the belfry. So I said, okay, I'm fascinated by the story, but I don't see any logic. And without logic, to me, I'm staking a reputation of whatever reputation I have of 60 years in the plantations. Then what I did was, ladies and gentlemen, I obtained 6, I was able to make the white tea. I obtained 6 or 7 samples of white tea and sent it to a panel of tasters in Colombo. Now, the taster did not know what it was. I did not know. It was touched by hand, untouched by hand, touched by hand, so on. Only the guy who poured the tea knew. The tasters, me the owner, and them the tasters, none of us knew. Now, you'll be surprised to learn that 95% of the tasters prefer the tea that was untouched by hand as being 100% more superior to the tea that was touched by hand. So that was one part of the. Now I know I can walk falteringly on this road because there is some logic and I can explain to them. Then it so happened that I went to France, to Grasse in France, which is a perfume city. And there, quite by accident, we met a very old man who's a perfumier, 82-year-old man. So it so happened that after some time, we got quite friendly. I told him the story of this white tea, virgin white tea, and how it's possibly the only tea in the world that's untouched by hand. He said, let me tell you a story. And he went on to recite a story to me. He said, you know, I'm a perfumier. I'm in the business of flowers. And I get my flowers mostly from India. Right? Jasmines from India. He says there is a particular lot of jasmines that I get that are deliciously aromatic. The other, same flower, same genetic composition. The other flowers that I get are incomparable with this particular plantation. So what I did was I got into a plane and went to Rajasthan, where this plantation was. And there I discovered that the people who are harvesting this supremely delicious jasmine flowers were using very, very slender latex gloves, so that at no stage did the flowers come in contact with the human body. And he said, you know, gentlemen, he said, you know, Mr. Gunaratne, he said, from the other flowers that I get from the other plantations,
I think
Why don't you call Malinga and tell him that we've lost him?
okay. I think he had a
Just call.
power cut. I'll talk to him.
Just give him a call, okay? Right. We're in the middle of the virgin white tea story. I've had the pleasure of actually tasting this. It is very different to normal tea, and I think it costs something like a kilo costs about $1,000 or so. So it's a very, very exclusive tea. Let's wait for the story to unfold.
Doctor, there was a power cut. Hello, Dr. Anushka.
Yeah. Now we can see you actually.
You can see me. I can't see you.
Yeah. You're back.
Yeah. Tell me now, where was I? Yeah. Now, now I'm an old man. I can't remember what I said. Okay. Then
we were speaking about the jasmines.
Yeah,
the jasmines.
He explained that there is a manifestation of what you eat in whatever you touch. Now that to me made complete sense, okay? Then, and he said, look, you are onto something very, very unusual and unique. I would give you one bit of advice. When you go back to Sri Lanka, you get this white tea chemically analyzed and do it in the world's most exclusive organization, which has credibility. And then I send this to SGS of Switzerland for quality analysis. And ladies and gentlemen, it came back with the unanticipated revelation that this tea had 10.11% antioxidants in the form of polyphenols. So now, I had this thing that started as a fancy, as a whim, eventually turned out to be something quite significant. One, it had all the testers confirmed that it was far superior to the tea that was touched by hand. Then the second one was we had this high occurrence of polyphenols as antioxidants. And we went to the world with this. There was a huge media exposure on this, okay? The world media was present, BBC, CNN, and I think I got some undeserved publicity. However, what happened was, it's a strange thing. The world's most exclusive tea house is not in the United Kingdom, is not in America, it is not in Germany. It is in the most unusual place, which is France, a non-tea drinking company. Now, the name of that company is Mariade Frères. And it is the dream of every tea producer to have his teas placed at Mariade Frères. Now, I live in though my friend Dr. Arosha spoke rather extravagantly about my achievements, I am comparatively unknown. I live in a obscure corner of Sri Lanka, and suddenly I get a call from the world's best, which is Mariade Frères, and none other than their chairman called me. Now, I was not unhappy with that call. He told me, he said, look, we saw the TV story, and also he was talking about the French perfumier. Can you send a sample of this tea to us? We are very interested in this tea. Now, I didn't want to indicate it to him, but I was nearly fell off my chair. And I sent him the sample. Now, they had tasted it in some way or the other. And they got back to me a couple of days later. And they said, look, we are extremely interested in this tea. But we don't market any tea that we don't see being produced. So therefore, can we come and see what you're doing? Now I'm telling them this fanciful story about virgins and golden scissors and all. So this may have intrigued them. But I also warn them that there are no more immaculate girls, that they are, but they use golden scissors and it falls into a bowl. So they came and saw it. They came for 2 or 3 days, spent with me. They saw what we were doing. They were quite impressed. They told me, I got a few tips from them. And they told me, look here, we are going to make you an offer. We will buy all the white tea that you produce, now and in the future. We will buy every kilo. If you expand your business, we buy that as well. However, try not to give it to any other merchant. Okay? To a merchant. You can give it to any private customers. So that is how it stands today. Quite by accident, I think really it was an act of God. who thrust this white tea story to me, but I was, I think, sharp enough to pick it up and to take it to its logical conclusion. So you're talking, ladies and gentlemen, to me. I have the honor and the pleasure of being the only man in the world who makes a tea that is completely untouched by hand and that is consistently sold for the highest price of tea in the world. You know, so that is the story of the white tea Arosha. I think I have spoken to now almost 50 minutes. You must be feeling bored of hearing my monotonous voice. So any other thing that you want me to do, I'll certainly address those issues. But I would pass this back on to the distinguished panel of doctors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gunaratne. And it is not boring at all, I should say. And it's very fascinating, interesting talks with your stories. I think this is not the first time that they are making historical mistakes as a politicians. So thank you very much, Mr. Gunaratne. And I think the panel is, the forum is for a discussion now. If you have any questions, you can ask Mr. Gunaratne.
You may ask questions about the books or the future of tea in Sri Lanka, anything really from Herman. If there is no one asking questions, I can ask a question, but I would like to give the others the opportunity. Okay, I'll ask a question, Herman, going back to for a sovereign state now that covers an important part of Sri Lankan political history. I have not seen that being documented in any book written in Sri Lanka, to be honest with you. Can you just very briefly tell us how you saw what you saw at that time when you got together with the late Dimbulagala Thero and helped set up the Madhur settlements and how Earth started crashing around you? If you can just take us through.
I can take it. I can quite easily. As I told you, I was working in the Mahavalley. And, you know, you'll be surprised to learn, Arosha, that there were some, how shall I say, some public servants, unknown, not coming into the forefront, but who had the greatest affection and loyalty to the state of Sri Lanka. Now those fellows, then those guys, somehow I got on very well with everybody. They realized that I had, Gamini Risanayaka was my friend. They told, they had several discussions among themselves, and they thought they must communicate a message to me so that I can communicate to Gamini. You know, their conclusion was this, very simple. There was the North and the East, which they claimed. Now, I must tell you, I am not a tribalist, I am not a racist. I was only acting in the perpetuation of a sovereign state. I mean, you know, there is absolutely no doubt about my credentials in regard to my racist stance. I told Gamini that it was the view of all the senior public servants. Now I'll make myself very clear that as long as we allow a contiguous block of land, contiguous, the operative word is contiguous, block of land from Malwa to up to the eastern province, that is Kumana. As long as we allow a contiguous block of land, to be occupied by a particular ethnic group, there will always be a cry for a separate state because they are in occupation and they will always make that claim. So they came and told me, he said, we are developing 3 river basins. One is the Madroya River Basin, right? One on the northern side, it's Polonnaruwa. On the eastern side, it's Batiklo. He says now illegal illegal encroachments are starting from Batiklo area. So what we have to do, never was it racist, Dr. Arosha. What we have to do is to settle people in those valleys of strategic importance, comprising of all the members of all communities, so that we break the contiguity. Now, are you with me up to now?
I am.
You know, now if you take the geography of this country, Madroya is Kandekadu, Trikonamadu, right up to the sea. So we envisaged a couple of human settlements right up to the sea, comprising of all the ethnic communities based on the ratio of their populations of the area. That is one. The other one is the Malwatu Nimne, the Malwatu Valley. Now, that was the furthest most settlement on the southern side. Now, that we also envisage settling people of all communities. But of course, when you do that, you know, majority of them are Sinhalese. They happen to be Sinhalese. And then the next one was Yarn Noya. Yarn Noya is north of Trincomalee. Now, Trincomalee was the most prized position that the people who were fighting for a separate state were seeking. State of Elam, Trincomalee. So if we made a 60,000 settlement, which is what we were contemplating on the Yangwe Valley, then you separate Yangwe from Jaffna. You separate Yangwe from Trincomalee. And you separate, and then comes Madroya, where you knock them all into a cocktail. Now, this was considered, the Indians considered to be this is to be a, I can't remember the word, but the most naked form of aggression and oppression of a mind. And these lands were unoccupied. We were not seeking to disturb anybody. We were just seeking to place human settlements on 3 strategic areas, which would in effect blow the myth of a state of Elam. Because the cry for a state of Elam can only exist as long as there is a contiguous block of land settled by an indigenous population belonging to a certain ethnic group. We shattered that. And then Parthasati came down, wanted my arrest. That's how we were arrested, you know. And of course, part of it went through. Part of it was dismantled because of the pressure from India. Do you understand me, Doctor?
I do. I hope the others do as well. Yes.
But it's difficult unless you see the geography.
So you work very closely with the late Dibula Agratero in this endeavor.
Yeah, he's the one who came and told me one day, I was in my room. He said, "Me matru me සීතකර කාමරේ ඉන්නවා. හරිද? ද්‍රවිඩ ජනතාව ඔක්කොම අපි මේ රටේ තියෙන සල්ලි වලින් සංවර්ධනය කරපු ඉඩම් හරිද? ඒගොල්ලෝ අල්ල ගන්නවා. ඉතින් මේගොල්ලෝ මොකද ඕගොල්ලෝ බලන් ඉන්නේ? මොකද මහතුරු බලන් ඉන්නේ?" And he was a little agitated. He's a rather aggressive fellow. And then I went and told Gamini, I said, "This fellow is coming and telling me this thing." That was the height of the, I think, yeah, it was also that we were just recovering. That's right. We were recovering from the 1983 riots, Arosha. And when I told this to Gamini, he said, "Herman, just don't talk about this damn thing now, because I can't deploy any security forces now I can't talk to General Article. He's not going to do it. So why can't you settle some people? Okay. Why can't you settle some Sinhalese on the same areas to form a hedge? So then I called the priest and said, "Hamdurada, egollo kaagewat aharane mene karanne. Ai oya magen aha inne. Oya kila danne etana minissu. Maatyo mawa bala gannawa." He told me. I said, "Oh, mama kiyapu deyata bala ganna." I thought this guy is going to land about 100, 150, 200 families. Would you believe it, Arosha? He put an advertisement in the Davasa at that time in Sinhala. And he took an army of 25,000 people. And overnight, the Maduroya Delta was completely converted into a Sinhala settlement. Now, the people who are seeking to separate our country, including India at that time, India is now making very conciliatory noises. But at that time, they were seeking to divide this country in 4 or 5 different places. They went out of their minds, you know. A special envoy came. And then they went into this. And I was taken into custody, you know. But I didn't mind that. And I told Gamini, I said, "No mind, I know these things." I said, "They can make a few noises, sack me from my job, that doesn't matter. But let the settlements remain." Right? Well, settlements remain, but most of it was disbanded. That's the story.
And
Arosha?
from what I recall in the book, it was not Gamini Sanaka, but Saumimuri Tondaman who came to your rescue. Am I not correct?
Tondaman.
That's what I recall from the book.
Yeah. Tondaman, you know, I used to spend most of my life in Kotpale. Tondaman was then also in Kotmale, but fallen by hard times. And he and I used to drink deep into the silent night. I was very close associate of his and friend. So much so that he's brought his grandson, and told me to teach this fellow work. And when I was in the police station, you know, my son was having an examination, and somebody came and told me that he was asking for me. So I told the OIC, who was a Mr. David. I said, "Mr. David, you know, I'm having a problem. I would like to go home because my son is in a bad way. And I've been trying to get the Gamin Disanayaka. He's also trying. But he doesn't seem to have met with any success." He said, "Mr. Gunaratne, Gamin Disanayaka is in a worse situation than you are. He is completely suspect of complicity with you. So there is nothing that he can do. But there's one man who can help you. And that is Tondaman. If you come to my office, I'll get you a telephone call to him." So, I mean, you know, then Tonda was my very good friend. I mean, he was a better friend than Gamini and all these fellows. Then I rang him from there, and I will tell you the way he speaks, for your information. I said, "Yeah, I'm in the police station." "What are you doing there?" he asked me. I said, "No, I can't tell him. No, we have put the Sinhalese fellows on." I said, no, they are questioning me on some kind of land settlement." "So you would have done because Gamini would have told you to do it." "No." I said, well, not only Gamini, I told Gamini to inform the president, because Gamini hadn't done that. He said, "Okay, I'll talk to the president today." So that was in the morning at about 10 o'clock. At about 2:30, I can see 3 ASPs, some other DIG fellow climbing up the steps with typewriters. And they told me, he said, "You know, we have been told to immediately take you and deposit you in your house, and that you're hitherto been placed on house arrest." Then Tondaman sent a representative to me. And what is the representative? Mr. Perisundara. Jaya Perisundara. He told me, "Herman, don't worry. You will be home by 6 o'clock. By 5 o'clock, I was taken to my house." Now that was Tondaman. right? And then subsequently, he also made me a, no, I'm only trying to say that that was an era of a different type of political leader. He subsequently made me a chairman of one of his main corporations. That is the handloom corporation. That's a story, Arosha.
Right. I just wonder whether anybody else has any questions to or comments to make.
Just one more question. I think the audience would be happy to know where your books can be borrowed, actually. Would you like to comment, Mr. Gunaratne?
Madam, I think Tortured Island is out of print, madam. That deals with the, that is a book that deals with the, we think that we are all one. We are not all one. There are so many interplays of castes in this country. Everything is related to caste. Now that deals with that. That is out of print. I must ask but Sovereign State I have, God's Secret Agent I have, Suicide Club I have, and what is the other book? Well, those are the three principal books. If you ever want it, you tell me, I'll send it to you. No problem.
Okay, thank you very much. And is there any place the others can buy, others or myself?
No, I know. I mean, I can tell you, Vijita Yapas are supposed to have it, and they, I think, do have it.
Thank you
But
very
if
much.
you have any, it's not very expensive. If you are short of the books, you tell me. I'll send it. No
Thank
problem.
you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Gunaratne. I think it's a very, I think we are privileged to have you here in this afternoon to talk about your books and your journey in life and everything. And I would really appreciate you took a lot of trouble to come all the way from your home, left your home to do this this meeting with us because of some signal issues and everything. And we really appreciate, and I would like to thank on behalf of Ceylon College of Physicians to you this afternoon. And thank you very much all for joining us. And
thank you, doctors. Arosha is keeping me alive, so I owe it to him. Okay.
It is entirely my pleasure. I just hope and pray you took all my advice. Thank you.
Not all. I still smoke a cigarette.
Not all. Only some. Okay. Right. Thank you, Herman. It has been a pleasure as always. And as I told the others, you're a master storyteller, and that was that even today. Can just and I mean, may I add, if the others are going past the southern province, close to Hangama is Herman's tea estate. It's well worth a visit. It is quite a unique place. And while the whole world is going very modern, Herman is going backwards using machines which are more than 100 years old to manufacture tea. So he's just making the best out of old techniques of making tea. So it's a fascinating place. I've taken many a visitor, my overseas friends there, and they've all come back really fascinated. So it's in Hangama. It's a place well worth a visit. Okay, a good night to all.
Thank you, Arusha. Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
doctor.
night.
Bye.